You are listening to The Black Landscape with Andrea Spearman, where Black excellence is always trending. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Andrea Spearman, and this is The Black Landscape, where we engage with emerging and established Black leaders here in the Bay Area. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts or in the comments of our social media. I'm Andrea, as always, and today I'm wearing my dark brown curly hair inside of a black head wrap that has multiple patterns, colors of red, green, blue, yellow, the assortment of love. And today I am wearing also my black and brown glasses and a burgundy sweatshirt that reads, Ratchet Black Girls Matter, Nerdy Black Girls Matter, Slim Black Girls Matter, Plus Size Black Girls Matter, and so on and so forth, describing the plethora of Black girls that matter. So let's welcome our special guest, Jewelle Gomez. Whoop whoop.
Hi.
Jewelle, please describe yourself to the people.
Happy to. I'm Jewelle Gomez. I am, I'm 75 years old. I have kind of light brown skin. I have a natural haircut. My hair at this point is all white. I'm wearing a brownish, orangish sweatshirt and lots of earrings.
Love it. And you said 75?
Yes.
Where? Y'all can't see her, but it's not giving 75.
Well, it's a combination of the African American, the Cape Verdean, and the Native American. None of those crack.
Yes. Okay. Melanin.
That's right.
Yes. So welcome. Jewelle is a living legend, living icon, fantastic writer. So Jewelle, you let me know before this started that you're originally from Boston and then via New York. Describe your life growing up on the East Coast.
Lovely. I was born and raised in Boston. I was raised by my great-grandmother. So she was quite elderly and very sharp, and her daughter, my grandmother, lived nearby. So I got a lot of that female energy as a kid growing up in Boston from women of color, which was very good because Boston was not that hospitable to people of color in the 50s and 60s or 70s, really. So, and we were, quite poor. I grew up on welfare, and the great thing was everyone read. My grandmother, my great-grandmother, my father, when I visited him, they were all big readers. So I read a lot as a kid. I got a scholarship to go to undergraduate school, which was fortunate since we didn't have any money. And fortunately, I went to a cooperative education school, Northeastern University in Boston, which meant that part of the year you'd be in school, and the other part you'd get a job related to what you hoped to be doing. So in the years that I was in college, I had several different jobs in journalism and finally a job at WGBH, the public TV station in Boston. So I got a lot of experience working in broadcasting, and I worked for one of the first Black television shows, weekly Black television shows. It was called then Say Brother. It's still on the air now. It's called Basic Black. And I was a production assistant on that show when I was in undergraduate school. And that really fed my desire to study journalism. So after I graduated, I moved to New York. I got my master's degree in journalism at Columbia. And still, after all of that, I really wanted to work in theater. So I wanted to work, be a writer. So I did a lot of stage managing off Broadway in New York City for everybody from Ed Bullins to dead Russian writers. I mean, I just stage managed whatever they put in front of me. I did it, and I taught some theater for some high school students, and I then joined Conditions magazine, which was lesbian literary magazine in New York City, and I joined their collective and really started writing my stuff then. Around that time, 83 Homegirls had come out, and The Color Purple. So I was writing critical pieces about that. And
Wait, what's Homegirls?
Homegirls,
Let me know,
it
'cause
was
I'm.
Homegirls was just recently reissued, actually, and it was the first anthology of Black feminist writing.
Mm.
And it came out in, I think, 83, and it was edited by Barbara Smith. And an anniversary edition came out just this past year. So it's definitely available. But it includes, oh gosh, all of Audre Lorde, Cheryl Clark, uh gosh, any of the African American women writers, poetry, fiction, essays, any African American writer you now think of, female that you now think of as well known, was probably in Homegirls. And it was at that time the original publication was published by Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, which was the first women of color publication company at that time. So I that's when I really, in '83, I started writing regularly in different medias and genres. And then I wrote the series of short stories, which I was reading from, that people enjoyed. And by then I had met Audre Lorde, and she had let me take a class. She was teaching at Hunter College. And I asked her if she would read these stories for me. And she said, well, I don't know. I'm not that fond of short stories, and I definitely am not that interested in vampires. And I said, oh, please, Audre. And so she read, she read them, and she came back to me and she just said, Jewel, this is a novel. You need to sit down with an editor and turn this into a novel. And her editor, Nancy Bariano, who had Lesbian Feminist Press, Firebrand Books, bought the book, and we spent a year editing it and turning the stories into the novel that is now the Gilda Stories, that's been in print for more than 30 years. Was
I love
recently
vampires.
oh well, you gotta read it. She's great fun. She's very uplifting and exciting. So the Gilda Stories has been in print for more than 30 years. And Cheryl Dunye, who is a director, African American director, she did the film Watermelon Woman. Um,
Yes.
yeah, she just optioned it to try to do a TV miniseries.
Ooh.
So our fingers are crossed for that. And so that was, when that came out, when the Gilda Stories came out in 91, there really wasn't anything like it. It's really the first Black lesbian vampire novel, really. And it got turned down by all the major publishers,
Of
which
course.
was actually probably lucky, because having Firebrand Books do it, it was a small press, independent press, it meant that it could stay in print. It didn't have to sell 500,000 copies. It just had to sell steadily. So now it's time has caught up with it, because there are all these speculative fiction classes on
Yes.
university campuses, and the Gilda Stories is still one of the few books that gets used in the speculative fiction classes and workshops. So I was fortunate to be a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yes. And I'm such a huge fan of vampire novels and that mystical world.
Mm,
As you said, like Black And then lesbian, they were I'm sure they were not checking for that at the moment. But that's what we need. We need the broad spectrum because as people, well, some people know, but vampires have such a sensual and sexual presence. It's like, why
Mm.
wouldn't they be across the spectrum of identity and orientation? They're gonna live forever, so they got a lot of time to get to know
They
people,
got they got a lot of time.
to do
And one
whatever
of
kind of explore they want to do.
the kind of thing that I did, which I'm really happy about, was I decided, the vampire, as you said, the vampire genre is very sensual. It touches people in so many ways because of the idea of living forever, but it's very predatory.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's, the woman is the victim and the male vampire is tracking her down. And, I decided I could shift the medium. And actually, Nancy Bariano is the person, my editor and publisher, who said, Jewel, are you sure you want to write a book who the main character is a Black woman who's a serial killer? And I said, oops, I guess not. And so we changed the principle of it so that her particular family of vampires don't have to kill. They take blood, not life, and leave something in exchange. That's their mantra. And that really made the opportunity to write about a character. It starts in 1850 and goes way into the future. And you can see how she can affect the lives of Black people around her rather than being a predator. And that to me is a great joy. So much of a joy that I'm now writing the sequel after 30 years.
Yes. Breaking news.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, see, I haven't read, but I'm going to get on it.
Go ahead.
I'm very much.
It's now available. You can get it downloaded or you can get it on audiobook. So I'm very excited because has having a renaissance in the sense of lots of people are rediscovering it, different generations. So that's fun.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. So, within all that, how did you get here to the Bay Area?
I moved here in 93.
Mm-hmm.
I had met the woman who is now my spouse. I had met her in 84 on a trip out here. And we liked each other, all those things that would make really good gossip happen. But then finally, we decided, well, let's just get together. We're not getting any younger. And so we got together. I moved out from New York. I really I stayed a lot on the East Coast because a lot of my grounding was there. My grandmother was alive still
Mm-hmm.
until I moved, and Audrey passed away the year before I moved. So when Audrey passed away, I felt like, okay, I could actually move to California. And so I did, and I've really, really enjoyed the shift. I mean, I miss my friends quite a bit, but
Yeah.
the having a whole different group of friends that I've gotten to meet and work with, and organizations, and I've worked a lot in philanthropy, both in New York and here in the Bay. So I've gotten to meet so many different artists because I worked at the San Francisco Arts Commission, and there's so many wonderful artists in the Bay Area, and many of whom were my applicants, really. And that's actually how I got to meet Ed Decker, who runs New Conservatory Theater Company. New
Yeah.
Conservatory Theater Center, I should say, because
Yeah.
my office was in a city building right across from his theater. So that's how we got to meet. So being in the Bay has been very good for me. And Diane and I have been together since 93, and we were litigants in the lawsuit against California for the right to marry.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we weren't sure how we felt about marriage as an institution, but we felt like people should have the right to do it if that's what they want to do. And so that was exciting. And then we got married because who wanted, an excuse for a party?
Yeah, everyone loves a party.
Don't we?
Yeah.
And we got married on a Halloween weekend, so
Oh,
we partied the whole weekend.
I love that. Wow. So love and just more opportunities to grow.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And it's so funny, uh, you know, having these different opportunities and meeting people. That's what we're about here in the Bay Area. That's what we have, so many people that have been on this program that have said, just something told me I had to bring myself over here to the Bay Area, whether it was for love or for work or just one person, they just woke up one morning and was like, San Francisco's calling. I said, really? Okay. I'm always entertained and tickled by folks who just get those like kind of spark feelings of just having to jump up and move their lives.
Mhm. It's it's if you feel the impulse, it's really good to follow it because at some point in your life you're going to feel like I don't want to move. I don't want to change. As we get older, it's more likely you're going to feel like staying where you are. So while you have the impulse to move, it's really good. I feel very happy about my move out here. I feel very, very happy about my relationship. It's been going really well, and we have grown together, which is, I think, what a successful relationship is about.
Yeah.
And yeah, and my opportunity with New Conservatory Theater Center was totally amazing. You know, being a playwright is in some ways a little bit harder even than just being a novelist, because when you write a novel, you can write a novel all by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you try to get somebody to publish it, and there are enough small publishers out there, you can find somebody. But when you write a play, you need a whole institution behind you.
Gang of folk.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel very fortunate that New Conservatory has produced my three most recent plays. And I hadn't done a play in a long time. The play I had done before New Conservatory was in 97, based on the Gilda Stories.
Oh, okay.
I used some chapters from the Gilda Stories, and you probably know this company, Urban Bushwoman Dance Company in New York. They commissioned me to write a full length theater piece based on parts of the Gilda Stories for their dance company. And
Yes.
Toshi Reagan did the music, and we toured about 13 US cities.
Wow.
And that was a great experience, and it really told me how much I loved playwriting.
Oh, I wish I had been
So,
old enough to experience that.
oh God, if you're ever in New York at the Lincoln Center Library, Performing Arts Library, they have a tape of it.
Say less.
Yeah, it's
I'm going. I'm booking
really, it
it.
was an extraordinary experience. The company was amazing. And so when I started working on my first this piece about James Baldwin, I wasn't quite sure what kind of piece it was going to be, and then Ed Decker came to an event in which I read monologues from it, and he was very excited, and he said, "Let's meet and talk." And the next thing I know, I was playwright in residence at New Conservatory Theater Center
Yeah,
for the next decade.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've described yourself as like foremother of Afrofuturism. How, you've already said, with the Gilda Stories, like personal identity has definitely played a role. Would you say that about all of your work?
Yes. I mean, I think personal identity plays a role in everybody's work. It's just when you're a person of color or queer that people start to focus in on the identity thing. I
Hmm.
mean, Stephen King's work is as much based on his identity as mine is on my identity.
Right.
Um, but yes, I think being a feminist certainly gives me a particular perspective, which is, why I wanted to do something with vampires that was not predatory. I wanted to create something that showed the power of women, but not women having to behave like men in order to be powerful.
Ooh,
Being
yes.
a, you know, being a lesbian made me interested in women characters. For a long time, I couldn't figure out, well, who was going to care about women characters? That's not what I was seeing so much on TV in the 50s and 60s. That women were not at the center of the narrative that often. So, uh, as I got more involved in the lesbian community, I thought, oh, right, I want to write about women, and women will want to want to
Yeah.
read about women. And so that definitely made a difference in what I wanted to write about.
Oh, I'm just in agreement. Women, we want to see ourselves
Yes.
represented, whether whether you're queer, straight, questioning, women's representation is needed in all places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I was starting with the James Baldwin piece, I realized that, and I'm a big fan. I love James Baldwin's writing. I just think he was a genius.
Hmm.
Um, and I realized sort of in my early drafts, this is not just about men. We know Baldwin was influenced by a number of women in his life, like Nina Simone
Yes.
and Maya Angelou
Mm.
and Lorraine Hansberry.
May she
So
rest.
that led me to bring Lorraine Hansberry into the play.
Yes.
Um, the next piece that I did for New Conservatory was about singer songwriter Alberta Hunter, who I had seen perform in the 80s in New York City in a club. And she, at that time, was in her 80s.
Oh, wow.
And I took my grandmother to see her, and I said, "Oh, Nana, see all these women in here to see Alberta?" I says, "You know why they're all in here?" She said, "No, why?" I said, "Because they heard a rumor that Alberta Hunter was a lesbian." And my grandmother said, "Oh, heck, everybody knew that."
She said that wasn't no secret.
Yeah, right. So from that time, that was in the mid 80s, I really wanted to write something about Alberta. So that's how the second play in this trilogy was about Alberta Hunter, and it's called Leaving the Blues. And so then for this final piece in the trilogy, which opens March 1st, by the way, here at New Conservatory Theater Center. It's called Unpacking in P-Town. I decided to write sort of about my grandmother, who was, as we used to call, a hot ticket.
So we're going to take a short break to catch up on previous episodes of The Black Landscape. Download on Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, and Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Be sure to leave a review 5 stars, and when we come back, we'll hear more from Jewelle Gomez. We are back with living legend and queer icon, Jewelle Gomez. So tell us about the show Unpacking in P-Town.
Great. Yeah, well, this is the third play in the trilogy that I was commissioned for at New Conservatory Theater Center. And I decided I wanted to write about my grandmother because she had been such an influence on me as a young person. And she had been a dancer and a singer on
Yes.
vaudeville, and doing the black theater circuit. And she was incredibly beautiful and musical and just charming. And
Mm.
she had a group of gay friends that she went to Cape Cod with every summer. Some
Mm,
were guys who had been on the stage with her,
mm.
dancing or singing. And one of the guys was Scottish, and his name was Scotty. And he had a cabin, and my grandmother would go down to his cabin and stay there for at least a month every summer
Oh,
in
nice.
the 60s. So I really loved going down there. I would go like for maybe a weekend. And it was the first time, you just hang out with a bunch of gay people. It wasn't, there was nothing about it. She wasn't saying uh, to them, be careful, don't say anything in front of my young granddaughter. She wasn't warning anybody that be careful how they acted or whatever. I was just there and enjoying them and their spontaneous breaking into song or a tap dance because they were also musical,
Yes.
black, white, Scottish. It was very exciting to me. It was like a glimpse into my grandmother's world. So I wrote this play about her and a group of her friends who, and I placed it in 1959, just before the 60s are about to burst open. Social change is on everybody's mind. And here are these performers who are retired, and they have to figure out what's next in their lives and what are some of the things that they haven't faced as individuals. What are some of the personal issues that they haven't faced as individuals? So I decided to pull that together as a kind of a tribute to them, and it's a comedy of all things because they were funny people, they were charming, and so it is a comedy, and it has some singing and dancing in it, but it's the kind of singing and dancing that we would do around our house, when you break into song.
Absolutely. I do it all the time. I'm very much a theater, performing arts nerd.
Yeah.
Any word or phrase could set you off.
Yep. 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 And we as a community of people of color, music has played such an important part in our lives and in our survival.
Hmm.
Um, it's really, to me, it's very exciting to be able to remember what's what's helped carry us through, whether it was gospel songs, whether it was Aretha Franklin, pop songs, the Temptations, whatever the music of our particular period is
Hmm.
what helped us survive and thrive, really.
Absolutely. I Music is such a entity that drives us.
Mm.
It inspires, it emotes, it relates, it amplifies, and then you put words on top of it, then you put some acting on top of it, you put a whole set together, and look at that, you got a musical.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. I was very fortunate, to grow up with two older women. I mean,
Mhm.
my grandmother would come to my great grandmother's house regularly, but usually on Sundays she would play the piano for hours,
Oh.
and she would play songs that she had sung when she was on the stage. She would play new pieces that she was trying to learn. It was just amazing. And I would just sit there reading the Sunday funny papers, which is why I remember it was
Aw,
Sundays.
I remember those.
So that, and as a young person and as a teenager, and she would just be playing and singing. It was really lovely um, to see that spirit because it wasn't like we were wealthy, that's for sure. And whatever job she had to do, various jobs once she left the stage and retired from singing and dancing. She worked in department stores. She was an elevator operator when they still had those. Um,
Wow.
she worked cleaning offices in the middle of the night. I mean, whatever those jobs were that were certainly not inspiring, when she sat down to the piano, you could see her be filled with life and inspiration just by her singing and playing. And I think I got that from her. And it's what I feel when I'm writing. So,
Mm, I love that. That is the life, of many a Black person, is like you have to deal with day to day toil in and out. But when you get to really just sit with your craft, joy,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
joy and abundance.
Yes, yes. It's very special. And if we can acknowledge it and dwell in it, it could be such a great benefit if we just don't take that joy for granted. You know,
Mm,
it could be such a great benefit. And I do feel like my grandmother's singing led me to where I am, to the last play that I've just finished writing that's about to open. I feel like it was her that led me here.
mm,
So,
I love that. For young people, young writers, emerging or mid career, what kind of advice would you give them?
hmm. Well, I always tell I always tell writers when they've taken my writing classes when I used to teach, make appointments with yourself to write, because you will do almost anything to sometimes to avoid writing because you're nervous, or you can't figure out what to write about, or you're afraid people aren't going to like it. But if you make an appointment, put it on your calendar, like pick a time that's a good time. Don't start, I'm going to write Monday morning at 6 a.m. If you're a person who can't get up early, don't do that to yourself.
No.
Pick a time that you feel like is a good, fresh energy time, and just put it in your calendar, an hour. And when the little timer goes off for that hour, sit down wherever it is with your journal, your notebook, or at your computer, and write something. You can go online, you can find writing prompts that'll tell you, write about what you see out your window, write about the last meal you had, write about the last friends you were with. You can get prompts from anywhere and just write. If you spend that hour writing, it doesn't mean it's gonna, you're gonna win a Nobel Prize for literature, but it does mean you are working the writing muscle.
Yeah.
And it is a muscle. And like any muscle you have in your body, if you don't exercise it, it doesn't really work that well.
Who you telling?
So that's the biggest thing I tell people. And if you look around where you live, uh, look into your memory of things that were from your childhood, or from your parents' childhood. Because a
Hmm.
lot of, I mean, I was I was writing about James Baldwin in 19 his experience in writing Giovanni's Room and trying to publish it in 1957, but all I know about that is what I researched, but the idea of the famous James Baldwin that I know struggling with whether to publish a book about homosexual love between two Europeans was not the first thing that was going to strike me to write about. But once I started thinking about it and how it related to me, and the idea of what I went through when I wanted to write a Black lesbian vampire novel, and the people who told me, "Why do you want to write that? What's that got to do with Black people? Why would you want to write something negative?" And I thought, "Oh yeah, I could definitely write about Baldwin." Um, so think about things that are outside of your experience and do the research and write. But make sure you make a date with yourself to exercise the writing muscle regularly.
I love that. Make a date with yourself. Well, it's been great chatting with you, Jewel. Tell the people where they can make a date to go see Unpacking in P-Town.
All right. Unpacking in P-Town is at the New Conservatory Theater Center, which is in San Francisco at 25 Van Ness Avenue. If you go on the internet and look up New Conservatory Theater Center, uh, and you click on it, the first thing you'll see is actually the pictures from my show. You'll see this great group of people in their shorts and t-shirts on the beach. So it starts performances March the 1st and it goes through March 31st. And, tickets are reasonable. There's opening night is sold out, fortunately, but there's a lot of other nights.
Yeah.
And I hope to be there many of those nights. So if you are there and you happen to hear me on Andrea's show, come on up and say hi.
Yes. Great. And I'll put those links in our show notes.
Great.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's great to get to meet you, and I will see you again.
Yes, I'm going to be at the show. I'm going to see what it's all about.
Oh, holler at me, girl.
Thank you, everyone out there, for listening and supporting another season. Again, leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts or in the comments of our social media. This has been another episode of The Black Landscape with Andrea Spearman, where Black excellence is always trending.